So May 10th of 2010 was my very first day working in Portland for Nike at the world headquarters. And I walked in with brand new Nikes, matching t-shirt, because that was cool back in 2010, and sat down after new employee onboarding, and I was mortified. I was given a spreadsheet on my left monitor. It was 1,300 rows of sneakers that needed to be entered into a tool that we called Goal, but it's really a version of MS-DOS. I was hired to do copy and paste mindless data entry. Finished that first day, and I genuinely wanted to quit. And I was on my way back in the next day, and I'm an eternal optimist, and I saw another department, and it was the apparel department, and they seemed to be having a lot more fun than my department. So I popped in, bought them coffee, and asked them if they were doing the same thing we were doing. And they taught me the magic of Excel. I learned pivot tables, I learned how to create macros, and I learned how to really do a lot with a little. And went on to be the highest performer on my team by the end of month one, doing about 10 times the output than the rest of my peers, was promoted 5 times in the next 5 years. But the learning from that was nothing about me. It was that when you seek inspiration from people that are just approaching work differently, that really great things can happen. So the goal for my session today is to walk you through 6 lessons from industries outside of multifamily that are going to span marketing, technology, and leadership. And my hope is that you can walk away with some actionable lessons to bring back to your teams or your offices. And along the way, if you have questions, I do consider myself to be highly interruptible. My name is Mike Wolber, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Rent Dynamics. I'm the host of the Modern Multifamily podcast. And my fun fact for you today is that in 2008, I decided to change my life, and I went from being one of the best video gamers in the world in a game called World of Warcraft. I lost 85 pounds and learned that once again, if you seek inspiration, that really good things can happen. Run a show for today. I'm going to really be walking you through these 6 lessons. I've got about 3 to 4 slides per lesson. If you want to take notes, please do. If you want to take pictures of the slides, please do. And at the end, I'm going to have a free download, so if you want to download the links in real time, you can definitely do so. And I hope this is interactive and fun. And anyone who likes coffee, we've got 6 $20 gift cards that Willie Jackson's going to be slinging for a couple poll questions that we have prepared for today. So the first lesson we're going to look at is centralization. And we're going to learn about centralization through the perspective of Marriott. We all know Marriott. Marriott created a beta program in South Carolina for a property that they called the M Beta. It was a $110 million asset. And they went all in on centralization. They centralized lots of different aspects with a goal to get a lot of signal so they could understand how to better centralized operations across their massive national footprint, international footprint. And I look across the industry, and right now I think multifamily is thinking about centralization in a lot of different ways. Just quick show of hands, how many of you are hearing about it, thinking about it, or reading about centralization? A lot of you are at least, thinking about it. And everyone's approaching it a little bit different. So I want to walk you through this lesson to kind of understand a unique way to think about centralization through the perspective of Marriott. And a quick trivia question. Which area of Marriott's operations did they centralize as part of their M Beta initiative? Guest experience, maintenance, technology, or do they do all of the above? Brett? You like coffee?
I sure do.
Okay, there we go, Willie. All of the above is right. They went absolutely all in. They centralized the entire thing. They went humanless completely for the entire property. And this was the experiment. We already talked about it being a Carolina asset. They opened to the public, and what they did is they made a really massive commitment to get signal from every single guest that came through. Every single check-in and check-out, they were running surveys to understand what was your feedback of humanless checking in or humanless housekeeping and all of these different aspects. And this really became the absolute playbook for Marriott. They didn't try to do it across their whole portfolio. Many of you, when you're rolling out technology, you're probably doing an incubated proof of concept, and it worked really well for Marriott. And they learned a lot of lessons along the way. People liked to make sure that phone calls got answered at all times of the day, and that really drove a lot of the contact center technology that now facilitates all things Marriott. People like to make sure that there is someone at the front desk to greet them. So even though there was an ability to check in at a little e-concierge that was humanless, if you had a question or if you just prefer the human over the chatbot, they had that opportunity for you. And those are really tangible lessons that they walked away with. And as an outcome, what Marriott learned is that there were 3 really impactful aspects of their business that were able to be measurably impacted through this centralized effort at MData. The customer experience really skyrocketed, and this was through survey. And I have the notes here in the deck for you to look at after the fact. They saw people go from about a 6 or 7 out of 10 to a 9 to 10 out of 10 based on response time. It was much faster and easier to get what they needed when they needed it. They were meeting their guests where they were. The second thing was maintenance and operations. Many of you have properties that are in clusters. They're in a city, and you probably have maintenance people that are at that respective property. What maintenance did here at Marriott is they shared maintenance staff across the cluster, saved them a lot of money, and it drove a lot of efficiency. And we're definitely seeing that right now in multifamily with the rapid trend of centralized maintenance. And then finally, I think the biggest lesson for them is that they had to get the technology right. Without understanding what technologies mattered and what data needed to be centralized, they had a lot of blind spots as a business. So in this, they standardized the Marriott technology stack to make sure that they, as embarked on centralization, they were able to do it on repeat. So my takeaway for you on this section is to experiment leveraging technology to create self-service solutions and look for signals. Signals might be an example of feedback that your property manager gives to you at the corporate office based on a good, bad, or ugly that new experience created. Second would be emphasize comfort, convenience, and personalization. That was definitely a big learning that Marriott had. And the final thing would be crawl, walk, and run. You don't have to go all in on this thing. You have to have a point of view, and you have to start. So the next one we're going to talk about is my favorite one from today. And we're going to talk about a sales-oriented approach from 2 retail companies. We're going to talk about Apple and Best Buy. I called 100 communities in Denver to get ready for today's presentation, and only 40 answered the phone. And of those 40, only 10% of them, that's 4, asked me a question more than, how can I help you? They did not run a discovery process with me. They did not ask when I was looking to move, what I was looking for, or any of the indicators to be able to teach me something during that conversation. And I believe deeply as a salesperson, but also as someone who works with many clients across the space, that standardizing sales process is a huge opportunity to create more measurable impact for all of your properties. And so my goal today is to walk you through 2 really great frameworks, one from Apple, one from Best Buy, so that you can just better understand how simple it can be, but also how impactful it can be. So we're going to start with Apple. And of course, theirs is called Apple. And I know this is a lot of words on a text. Everyone told me it was too much, but I felt like it was going to be the best way to bring the lesson home today. So their Apple analogy really stands for approach, probe, present, listen, and end. And it's simple. It's very memorable, and that's one of the biggest reasons that Apple has done this. It makes it easy during new hire onboarding. It makes it really easy for stand-ups when they're doing those every morning before they open the store. And it also makes it really easy to measure what's working and what's not. Are people following this very simple and very repeatable process? And I don't even think I need to read this slide to you. I think it kind of stands on its own, but I'm going to briefly just talk through the significance of each and every one of these. So A is the approach. When you walk into an Apple store, no matter what, even if you just want that USB-C cord and you don't want to be touched or talked to, they talk to you. It is an Apple thing, isn't it? And it's because they standardize the approach. They say greet every guest with personalization and make sure that they hear from you, even if they're just looking to get that cord and free to get out of their way. Maybe you can hold it for them or bring that digital checker outer. Then they probe. If you do have questions, just like we can do in multifamily, they're taught to ask specific questions to make sure that they can guide a teaching conversation during the sale. Those questions are documented and standardized. They're very easy to find online. And it's a great way to take entry-level retail employees to being superheroes within this retail business. Then they're asked to standardize how they present. They're taught storytelling. So if someone is during the probing phase, brings up that they want to do something very specific, they're taught how to tell stories with their different products. Just like when you walk a great multifamily asset, you want to know how many steps is it to the swimming pool, or how many coat hangers can I fit in this closet? Being able to tell stories is a superpower in sales across the board. They're of course taught to listen. We use a tool called Gong to record calls when we talk to customers and prospective customers, and my favorite score in there is called patience. On average, our sales team waits about half a second before they respond, but Gong says we should wait at least a second. And that's what you learn with listening, is typically someone has more to say, but teaching how to pause or listen is usually where the good stuff happens. And then they're always taught how to end. End is either closing or confirming a next step, or making sure that they have a question for the technology team, that they're guided there to end the experience with good predictability and a great experience. And a framework as simple as this has done wonders for Apple, and they've never changed it. My very first job of all time was in 2002, working for Store 539, shout out, Anchorage, Alaska, at Best Buy. I was a very, very dorky computer associate, went on to be the sales manager, and was so dorky that I got hired to be in the Geek Squad, actually, and that's how I finished high school. But this is how I was trained. So Best Buy uses a framework that's since evolved to Connect, but back in the early 2000s, they called it the CARE framework. Contact, ask, recommend, and encourage. It's even simpler than Best Buy. And as I think about your multifamily communities, if it's something longer, more complex like Apple, or your core values or the acronym of your business, something as simple as this has really made it repeatable for Best Buy. And associates are asked to contact someone within 30 seconds of them walking into the carpet. The carpet is each individual department, and to simply say hello. Then they're asked a very simple question, what brings you in today? They're not asked, what are you looking for? It's not a pointed question, and it's always open-ended, what brings you in today, which drives great experience for the consumer. They're then taught to recommend a next step. Maybe that's a product, maybe that's a phone call, whatever that thing might be, but they're always driven towards a recommendation and then encouraging the sale. And encouraging the sale might just be a next meeting, or it might be coming back to meet with somebody in multifamily for that next tour, but making sure that every experience ends with encouragement for a clear next step is really, really important in sales. And one of the biggest nuggets that I would take away is to start somewhere and to try to standardize. Standardize your sales process. How do you answer the phone? How do you greet? Those kinds of things can go such a long way, especially for making that onboarding experience predictable. The second is to iterate over time. I look at Apple, and they've really kept it the same, but Best Buy continues to evolve. They've gotten cannibalized with companies like Amazon, so they've had to make sure that that in-store experience can be as good as possible for revenue. So they continue to iterate their sales process, but they started. And then don't overcomplicate it. A couple letters, an acronym, a story, maybe it's a children's book that turns into how you run sales on site. Something is always going to be better than nothing. So the next one I want to talk about is one from from Amazon, and it's their customer-centric team blueprint. And I can think of dozens of times where I've been on a cross-functional team charged with making a big decision. Maybe it's implementing a new CRM, or maybe it's a hiring committee that was just way too big. And you hear things like paralysis analysis, or decision by consensus, or too many, I think it's chefs in the kitchen. Is that the right phrase? Is that how you say it? And like those to me are all indicative of there being too many people, and there are too many things in our way. People don't feel autonomy in that, and it can really impact culture. And I think culture for all of us is a head nod. It's really important. And Amazon has a great lesson here. So trivia question for you. Which food choice is Amazon's core teamwork model based off of? Is it pizza? Is it apple pie? Chicken wings? Or is it PB&J? You get $20, but you're wrong. Apple pie? Nope, it's pizza. So it's pizza, and I know that doesn't make sense at all. So I will explain it to you, and I hope this is memorable. And this came directly from Jeff Bezos. Hate him or love him, this came from Jeff. So Amazon created something years ago, and they call it the two-pizza framework. And the premise is very, very simple. Teams should be small enough to be able to be fed by 2 pizzas or less. You should not have 20 people in a boardroom making a decision. That's too many people. That's not 20 active voices. Preach. And this is a very simple concept. Their thesis is that no more than 5 to 10 people on a multi-million-dollar or a hiring decision should ever be involved, because speed is a huge competitive advantage in business. And Amazon implemented this, and it created a really cool culture that they're now really known for across the enterprise, which is a culture that stands on speed and autonomy. And people love being part of a culture that goes fast, makes decisions, fails forward, all of these cliches, but buzzwords that matter, are the things that really do matter in today's business and in today's climate. So let's take a look at kind of what they learned. And so we'll kind of start at the bottom. They started with single-threaded leaders. And what this means, this phrase, is that they went to a model where you could make individual decisions versus decisions by consensus. So you'd have an executive sponsor for a team, a leadership sponsor, and then you'd have a sub-team, but that leadership sponsor did have the decision power to make the call if the team ever got stuck. And that helped have there be a captain of the ship to really keep the team moving the right direction. It also created a culture of customer obsession. You think about our world, we're talking to residents and prospects hundreds of times across your portfolio in a given day, which creates a lot of signal. And one of the best ways to please someone is to move fast and what that response looks like, to make a quick decision, to save budget, whatever it might be. And it really created a culture of customer obsession, where they were able to move faster, make decisions, and ultimately impact the customer with a positive experience, because they were always improving in the eye of their consumer. The other thing is that it created end-to-end ownership, meaning that people really felt empowered to make decisions throughout this whole process. This team would decide what steps are we going to follow. This team would decide what's your role going to be versus your role, which drove a really good habit across the business of autonomy and kind of a do-it culture. And then the final thing is they started to stand for action, not just talking about it, but being about it. And I think it really did a lot for Amazon from a recruiting standpoint, from a retention standpoint, and they saved hundreds of millions of dollars every year by simply cutting meeting time out of their schedules, especially for a business that's that big and that scalable. So I'd say a couple nuggets from Amazon that I think are widely applicable if you're a technology provider, if you're an ownership group, or if you're an operator, is small autonomous teams can make a large impact on collaboration agility, as well as a customer focus within your business. And ultimately, it's also going to create a more fun working environment. And who doesn't like having fun and going fast at work? All right, next up, we're going to talk about Google. You're all leaders today. Think about it or don't, you're a leader. You aspire to be a leader. You manage people, or you probably think about managing people one day. And there aren't a lot of playbooks that many businesses harness in multifamily of how to train and build future people leaders. And that's normal. That's normal in many businesses that aren't inside of multifamily. But Google has more than 15,000 managers that are manager, director, VP, or CXO. And they have done a world-class job of studying the traits of what good managers do, what good managers look like, to be able to do that on repeat. To know if you want to make a bunch of money, the next step doesn't have to just be people leadership if you don't fit into the DNA that we've really agreed upon and believed in. And I think that's done a lot for their business. And I can definitely reflect on that as a hiring manager, where I've promoted someone that was kind of the easy button promotion. That person was really good on the team, they were a great individual contributor, and it was a logical next step to move them into a management role. Come to find out that they were a superhero at their job, and I should have just paid them more to keep doing that. And it was not good for the business, and they found themselves floundering, negatively impacting others, and it was no one's fault but mine. And I think that's where learning what a leadership DNA can look like for your business from another business can be really helpful. So let's dig into Project Oxygen. And before we do, which of the following is considered a top behavioral trait of successful managers according to Google's research? Do they demonstrate adaptability? Do they address conflict resolution? Do they support career development? Or trick question, is it all of the above? It's not D. It is not A. It is C. You guys crushed it. Give yourselves a round of applause. So it's the interesting thing with this is that all of those things matter in people leadership. So it was a trick question. I'm sorry. I don't like to trick people. I'm very kind. I think of myself as being kind. But what they found is that the best people leaders that are responsible for coaching and development wake up every day thinking about what's the right next step for you and how can I help you get there. And that is the single biggest thing that they found in this study of more than 15,000 managers and more than 100,000 interviews, is that singular focus is what separates the best from the aspiring. And again, I'm sorry, I know this is a word chart, but I think it's important because there were 10 lessons. So I am going to walk you through these take a picture, you can download the slides at the end. But these were the 10 habits of success that Google found as they studied the highest profile, highest performing, not just managers, but the teams with the highest culture index. And that's how they came up with this. It wasn't just saying, hey, you're an awesome manager. It was saying, why is your team scoring a 9 out of 10 when the rest of the business is trending at a 6? So the first was that they were a good coach. They started the one-on-ones out with coaching, not tactically probing at your revenue gap or your delinquencies, but they started by really talking about you. How are you doing? Are we on pace for the goals that we've set as a team? And that coach mentality is an absolutely underlying theme of managers. I can agree with that, and of course, Google can too. The other thing is they empower teams and they don't micromanage. And I bolded the first one to really focus on the positive here. They empower their teams. They encourage their teams to scrape their knees, to fail forward, to try. And if you make a mistake, maybe just don't make the same one again. And there's a lot of DNA built in with that culture, which you hear a lot about in technology, which is doing things in sprints, going fast and trying. The third is that they created an inclusive team environment, a space that just genuinely felt safe. I was talking with a dear friend who happens to be here today, and the way that she starts her team meeting is 60 seconds of silence and reflection. We're going to turn our cameras off, we're going to mute ourselves out, and we're going to get in the right headspace. That allows you to enter the scene and then really be in the right space for an inclusive, safe team environment. They focus on success and well-being. They think about the person as a whole, not just the person as a professional within Google's ecosystem. They're thinking mental health. They're asking about, hey, you've got a ton of PTO. It's use it or lose it here. You should take some time off. And they're thinking about the whole in that regard. But they are productive and results-oriented. And I think it's really interesting here that it's not just about checking in on the heart-to-heart side, but they are creating a team of highly functioning, outperforming individuals because the coach's job is to help the team have the best probability of getting a win. They're a strong communicator. I think I'm going to just put a period at the end of that one. That probably goes without saying. They support career development, and they discuss performance. And they're comfortable giving feedback as to where someone's gaps might be as it relates to that career development. This is a really long guide that I broke down, and this section was really interesting because Google does a lot to make it really clear on how do you go from being a property manager to a regional property manager. They really get clear when it comes to titles and expectations. They're clear with vision and strategy for the team. I think great managers do a good job of understanding what leaderships and executive team members are thinking about and cascading that down to the front lines in a way that brings them along. And they saw that because the team understood the vision and strategy and was therefore able to anchor themselves in better decision making because they understood if that fit within the guardrails or if that was something that was a total nice to have for the business. They have key technical skills. Google, one of the cool things about Google is that they found that the best managers have tactical relevance within the function that they're responsible for. So if I'm managing a team of salespeople or leasing agents, the expectation is that you're a pretty damn good salesperson or leasing agent when you're coaching these young folks. And it's the same thing at Google. If you're coaching a team of SQL developers, they expect that that manager can come help solve problems or get them to the right problem solver with those technical skills. They're great at collaborating across Google. They know the ecosystem, and they can help you move fast without getting stuck. I get stuck in a small business of 200. I can't even imagine what it's like here. And for many of you that have decentralized teams all around the United States, being able to know who the right bat phone is for the right person at the right time can be a total superpower. And then finally, they're authoritative and they're not afraid of making decisions. At the end of the day, just like the lesson we had from Amazon, at the end of the day, someone has to be comfortable making the call, even if it's maybe the wrong call. And they saw a lot about that when they studied this within Project Oxygen. So kind of takeaways from Google as we think about leadership. Take the time to invest in leadership development. And you can curate this on your own. There are lots of frameworks out there that you can purchase or buy. I'd be happy to recommend some that I think are really applicable to this audience. The second would be uncover your team's strengths and empower them. One of my favorite things to do when I'm onboarding a new team member is take them through StrengthsFinder 2.0. It's $10, gives you a really good idea to understand what they're great at naturally, and then the things that they're just never going to be good at, so you can guide them towards doubling down on the good, which are those top 5 strengths. And then, of course, encouraging teams through well-communicated and action-oriented goals. Not just talking about it, but being about it is a lot of what I learned from this lesson. So who in here has heard ancillary revenue or ancillary services talked about within your portfolio? I read 7 of the public REIT reports from Q1 over the last couple of weeks. I'm a nerd. You'll learn that about me if you haven't already. They're long, but any publicly traded company has to ship an earnings statement and a presentation to their investor pool once a quarter. And every single company in the REIT market right now in multifamily is talking about centralization, which was our first discussion point, and they're talking about ancillary revenue because rent growth has slowed, which we know. And so I think really a relevant way to think about this is zooming out and looking at another industry that we are engaging with weekly or monthly, maybe at least quarterly for a group like this, and it's the airline industry. And as I think about ancillary revenue, I think a lot about industries like the airlines or even industries like hospitality. My favorite thing to do when I travel to a Marriott is to pay $40 to have that Peloton delivered to my room. It's a $40 upcharge. If you ask, they'll usually do it. I'm between calls. It's the easiest way to make it fit my schedule. And that's a really easy tactical example of ancillary revenue or ancillary services that could be applicable to how we think about amenitization and things like that. But we'll focus on the airline industry for today. So 3 examples that I'm going to kind of walk you through. The first comes through JetBlue. I think one of the myths with ancillary services is that you have to make money from them. And JetBlue was one of the very first airlines to put that little tablet in the chair right in front of you. They called it in-flight entertainment, and they've never charged for it, and they commit to never charging for it. But as an early adopter of that technology, deploying it across their whole fleet of airlines, they deployed this ancillary service that certain seats had, certain didn't, which drove a decision to try to book faster. And as such, they've created a lot of loyalty by having something that's available for most fleets, not all. They also ran a big campaign back in the mid-2000s that was called Even More Space. And they were one of the first airlines to segment charging based on legroom. And it's a small charge. It's $10, $15, $25 to have more space. And it's been an easy way for them to mark up about 12 to 15% per guest per flight in a way that the consumer is really willing to pay for, even if there's a little bit of salt in your teeth as it relates to why you're doing it. I'm a tall guy, so I always pay for it. The second example comes from Southwest. Any Southwest fans in here? So I've actually never flown Southwest. This one was interesting for me to learn about. Polarizing. Well, the great debate. We'll end 5 minutes early so we can come host the great debate on Southwest. They were one of the first companies to pay for early bird check-in. So if you don't have status with Southwest, you can pay a couple bucks to be able to still check in early, to get that priority seating, to guarantee yourself a spot on the airplane for the check bag or whatever it might be. And they also created a really, really great Rapids Rewards program, being able to earn points through participation, being able to share points with family. And they've done a lot to create raving fans that aren't even loyal to Southwest because their friends and family are. And by creating programs like that, that has driven revenue by creating a program that was optional, like that loyalty program. We have a couple clients that are talking about creating programs that would actually open up the ability to break your lease mid-cycle. But as long as you stayed within their given brand, it would be okay. And you could actually start to accrue points based on number of months you've paid rent on time or number of renewals you've gone through. And I think reimagining what a point system could look like in multifamily, even if you're managing it in Google Sheets or Excel, is actually quite realistic. And then there was Spirit. I think Spirit's the most unpopular example that I have today. Guess I got it right on that one. But I think it's a great example of making pricing completely unbundled and having absolutely everything be ancillary. It's not popular because the consumer feels nickel and dimed. You pay for the ticket, you pay for the check bag, you pay for the carry-on bag, you pay to have them stop to give you the cup of coffee, you pay for priority. I mean, it's bad. I did it as a test for this, and I flew Spirit to Las Vegas for a conference. It was bad. It was bad. But it's an interesting lesson in terms of maybe how to think about it, but I think more importantly, maybe how not to think about it. And I'd say a couple kind of nuggets for us on the multifamily side. Thinking differently about how you offer subscriptions or resident reward programs, I think, is a really great place to start. Just reimagining what it could look like to create a culture of loyalty, or maybe similar to what we learned about with Marriott, maybe thinking about what it could look like to monetize the cabanas on a Saturday because it's busy, or could we open up a coffee shop in the main lobby that's open to the public that drives a little bit more brand and traction? Could we think about something in a unique way as an avid consumer? I think those are a couple of things you can take away from looking at an example like JetBlue. So now I want to kind of end with a topic that is very relevant to all of us. It's the frontier of AI. How many of you have heard about AI? How many of you are sick and tired of hearing about it? So my guess is that the reason you're sick and tired about hearing about it is it still doesn't feel practically applicable. It feels like it's this big conversation that's overwhelming, that doesn't actually make you any better at your job. It doesn't help your team go faster. It doesn't remove headcount. It doesn't delight the resident. Maybe it's still just your chatbots, and chatbots are just fine. Love them. And I think one of the cool things about the last 6 or 7 months has been that AI is now being delivered to the enterprise. All technologies are starting to consume this in a way that's much more practically applicable. And so I want to spend some time just kind of talking through a couple examples. Consider this like a micro masterclass on the current state of AI, and I hope it's helpful as we dig in. Pretty cool. So Adobe just launched this program. It's called Firefly. It natively sits on top of Photoshop. You can get Photoshop for $25 a month, no barrier to entry aside from that monthly fee. And they're using generative AI, similar to what you're hearing about with Chat GPT, to be able to talk to that thing like a human and have the technology take action as if that was your teammate. So rather than having to ask your graphic designer to do what would have probably taken an hour, you can now do that within the matter of minutes to redesign a floor plan, to think differently about a multifamily design in general. And they're not charging for it, which I think is really interesting. They probably will, but right now you can sign up for the Firefly beta for free at adobe.com. They deployed that this last Monday, and it went absolutely gangbusters on LinkedIn. So I'm sure there's some head nods who have actually already seen that clip. But I think the example there is just that AI is getting more in our hands, more palpable, and I think that's one of the things I'm encouraged by. So you've heard of Chat GPT? Okay, you've heard of Chat GPT. You probably are. Has anyone actually logged in? Has anyone downloaded the new iPhone app that's free that was launched this last Monday? Great, okay. So just a couple fundamentals. I want to spend some time just talking about what it is. It's an advanced language model that uses deep learning techniques to generate human-like experiences. That's a mouthful, but I felt like I had to read it to get that one across because it is human-like. And it's kind of interesting right now because the founder and CEO right now is actually advocating for some control and legislation over it because there's some concern that it could go gangbusters in terms of adoption. But when you punch in a query, you are able to get a human-like response. One of my favorite ways to use it is if I'm feeling stuck with an email, something very basic or an outline for a presentation. I'll give it my idea, tell them what I want the structure to look like based on the past one that went well, and then GPT will regurgitate something in me that because I shared an example of my voice, it feels oddly like it's in my voice. And it can handle long form and short form, which is really, really interesting. And the cool thing about it is whether it's on your phone or chat.openai.com, you're able to get a query that is coming right back in real time in a chat format. So unlike many of the chatbots in multifamily that are clicking buttons, not engaging in natural language processing, we're seeing lots of technology companies start to incorporate this into their user interface. We've seen it with Zumper, we've seen it with Zuma. It's been pretty cool to see how companies are thinking about harnessing this a little bit differently. And has anyone kind of within the realm of GPT heard about prompts? So prompts is kind of where this gets good. So prompts are very specific actions that you give GPT in order to take a desired action. So asking something that's like really open-ended, you're going to get like a mediocre result. But if you really try to frame it, and I'm going to share an example that I hope you appreciate here in a minute, that's like really specific, you'll be much happier. So the more prompts you can give it, the better. And within GPT, you can thumbs up or thumbs down. So if they didn't get it right or it wasn't the right direction, tell it. It does not have feelings, and it's totally okay to help it get to know your voice. And I would highly encourage you, if you do play around in here, to set up categories in there. So maybe you have one that's for review responses, and maybe you have one that's for social media posts, team department updates, and things like that, so it can start to learn your voice based on what you're talking to it about, because it puts on a different hat within each of those different categories. So one of the big updates back in the early part of Q2, which we're in right now, so this was in April, is that we're starting to see the search engine results page, the SERP, start to adopt this. So now when you're asking a question that requires some context, that's truly an open-ended question, we're going to be seeing generative AI starting to be experimented on Google. And they're using a tool called Bard, B-A-R-D. So Bard is the competitor to GPT. It's free, but it's in a beta. I have not been approved. I'm trying. I don't know what I did wrong. But Bard is what's powering this. But it's really interesting because in this example, what's better for a family with kids under 3 and a dog, Bryce Canyon or Arches National Park? You don't really want to see a website answer for that when you're asking the search engine. You're wanting to hear someone on a human level give you your take. I've got kids, I've got dogs, I've got a trailer that's 31 feet. And most trailers cap you at 28 feet in these national parks. So it's been really interesting to see this. Multifamily has not seen this come in yet, but you think about the long-form search, which is very real if you're a marketer. People ask long-form, we call those long-tail searches. This is going to revolutionize the importance of SEO for multifamily, making sure that your website has all of the answers, that your title tags and H1s drive good behavior, but also making sure that you're using technologies like this to feed in as many inputs as possible, because when people ask for the best this and the best neighborhood for this kind of experience, this is going to be where the winners are going to really stand out. So I'm really, really excited to see what this looks like for our industry. And I want to end on this section with just some like inspiration for maybe how to practically apply Chat GPT to your business or to your role or even to your personal life. And my story is going to be personal on this one. An outline for a presentation is a great way to think about using GPT. So you want to have a 12-slide presentation. You're going to be giving a state of the business on revenue performance, rent growth, and forecasted exposure across your portfolio. Feed it some data, feed it the prompts. It'll help you come up with the outline. You can copy and paste that into Microsoft Word, work on it, tweak it. And I think that really helps you break through the mold of creativity with using it for an outline absolutely for free. Does anyone here use Excel like as much as I do, or Google Sheets? I never thought when I became an executive for the first time that I would spend like 2 to 3 hours a day in Excel, but I do so much business in Excel, and my wife is a superhero in there, but I'm not. And I miss her every day because she's at home with the kids, and half the time she doesn't answer my FaceTime. And we used to work together at Nike, and Excel formulas, if you need to move cell C2 combined with B2 to output something with this word in front of it, it'll give you a copy and paste formula. And I'm now the help desk for our business, even though it's not me, it's GPT, but it's been really helpful. And you can give it very, very, very specific commands or prompts to help you. I usually use YouTube when it comes to trying to be a good husband at home, trying to fix the disposal or whatever it might be. But Chat GPT has been really helpful because if I don't have the patience to watch the video, I'm now getting, hey, give me the 4 steps I need to do in order to do X task at home with this appliance that's this model. And it's putting it together in the 4 that I asked for, even if the instructions were 12. And that's a really helpful way to consume, search, and to make it really actionable. Social content, I think, makes a lot of sense. Social media, personal, professional. I've got 2 kids. My son is 6, my daughter is 4. We do bedtime stories using Chat GPT. So my son Nathan, right now he likes scary stories even though he doesn't like being scared. And it's because they're like funny, scary stories. So 2 nights ago before I was flying here, I go, hey bud, what's tonight's story going to be? We do one on my phone and we do one that's like a book because he's learning how to read. He goes, I want the main characters to be you, Mama, Quinn, and me. So I plug those in. I tell GPT that Nathan's sick so that they write it with the right language. I don't want it to be too scary. I tell GPT that I want it to be a scary story. And I ask Nathan who he wants the main bad guy character to be. And he says, a toothbrush that can't find his toothpaste. And the first time I did this, I did not give GPT a word count limit. And it was like 1,000-word story. And when you're doing bedtime for your kids, you do not want to read a 1,000-word story. So my new best practice is 200 words. I end it with 200 words, and I probably have a library of maybe 150 so far, and I think I'm going to write a book. I think I'm going to write a book with it. But if you're nervous about trying it, I highly encourage you to use that as maybe just a way to step into it for family or friends. So before we wrap up today, I just kind of want to walk through kind of those 6 things that we discussed. Centralization, I'd say right now the industry is learning what that means. I think the industry is widely mixed on where to start. We're seeing a lot of clients start with property admin, things like collections that you don't need your property manager to do that. Hire one person at the corporate office just to call on delinquent residents, no problem. You'll probably save a lot of money by freeing up time for them to focus on residents. We're seeing people start with maintenance. We're seeing people start with leasing. But I think looking outside provides some inspiration for how you can think about your playbook, because no one's is going to be the same in multifamily. We talked about sales strategies, whether it's a simple acronym like CARE or Apple or reimagining it. I would really challenge you to think about your leasing teams and are they actually following a process? A one-page playbook for them to follow how to deliver the best tour for your business or to handle these 3 objections, because you know those objections. That will make a massive impact to the performance of that property. Team management, making sure that we're creating autonomous teams, that we're moving faster, that we're keeping up. It was pizza, if you remember, and I'd love to hear if anyone actually uses that down the road. Leadership framework, as you think about the future leaders of your varsity team and the business that you work for, making sure that you know what it looks like to create career paths for people into leadership, as well as people that want to remain in the front lines. Ancillary services, I think a lot of people can go wrong here in terms of how they think about them, how they charge residents, how they create experiences to opt out or opt in. But there are a lot of great examples across retail, across the restaurant space, e-commerce. We obviously talked about the airline industry today. And AI, I'd ask you to really think about embracing it. It's here. I don't think it's going to go away. I do think it will be reformed, but I do think that teams that can think about this to break through a creative barrier, things like that, are going to have a field day when it comes to going faster and embracing the most modern technologies that are available to us today. The slides are available here with a simple QR code. We're not going to give you a cold call or a pitch after this. It's just going to be an easy download on our website. I hope that works for everybody. If not, I've got it here on my phone. That is my email as well as my cell phone. If you have any feedback from today, goods, bads, and uglies. I've got an ego like everybody does, but I'd say it's pretty thick. And thank you a ton for sharing the time with me. And if anyone has questions for the group, happy to take questions, or feel free to stay back and just chitter-chatter. But thank you guys for sharing the time. That was great.